This is Ms. Humbert here. Today we're going to be doing the Unit 5 Quiz 3 review. So we're going to be doing what you need to prepare yourself to take that next quiz. So the first problem asks you to solve by the zero product property or the quadratic formula. I actually don't care what method you use. Just remember that if the zero product property does not work, you do have to then try the quadratic formula. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at number 1. So number 1 to me looks like it's pretty easy to use the quadratic or the zero product property. We're multiplying to 50 and adding to 27. Now I know that that is something that I can do. 50 to 27. So that's going to be 25 and 2. So now what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to split up that middle term. So instead of writing 27x, I'm going to put an x with each of those. So I have 25x plus 2x plus 50 is equal to 0. So now I'm ready to factor by grouping. So I'm going to go ahead and make my two groups. Between x squared and 25x, I can divide out an x. So then I'm dividing each of those terms by x. And when I do that, I end up getting 25. Between 2 and 50, I can take out a 2. So I'm dividing each of these by 2. So 2x divided by 2 is x, and 50 divided by 2 is 25. Okay, so then I see that my leftovers are matching, so I'm going to go ahead and write those as one parenthesis. Then I'm going to get rid of those, and in the other I'm going to write what's left over, which is x plus 2. So I'm going to take then each of these factors and set them equal to 0. So x plus 25 is equal to 0, and x plus 2 is equal to 0. So here, subtract 25 from both sides, and you get that x is equal to negative 25. Here, subtract 2 from both sides, and you get that x is equal to negative 2. So right here are your two answers for number 1. Now, if you went through and did the quadratic formula, you would get the same thing. Now, let's go ahead and let's take a look at number 2. Just to save you guys time, I will tell you that number 2 does need to use the quadratic formula. So let's go ahead and let's set that up. So we know that our A is 2, our B is 6, and our C is negative 7. So let's put that in the quadratic formula. So we're going to do opposite of B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4 times A times C, all of that over 2 times A. So then I'm going to simplify what's underneath the radical first. So I'm going to do 6 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 7. So negative 6 plus or minus, when I type that in my calculator, you always want to make sure you put parentheses around the squared term. So 6 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 7. Well, that's going to be 92. And then we're going to divide it by 4. So then we're going to do negative 6 plus the square root of 92. Now I want to type that in my calculator first. Negative 6 plus the square root of 92. Hit enter and then divide it by 4. And when I do that, I get 0.90. So on the next one, negative 6 minus the square root of 92. I'm going to type that into my calculator, hit enter, and then I'm going to divide it by 4. So then I get negative 3.90. Remember, guys, on these, you want to be watching your rounding. So if we're doing 2 decimal points, you always want to look at that third decimal point. Okay? So let's go ahead and let's take a look at number 3. I know I can factor number 3, so I'm going to go ahead and set up my x. So I'm multiplying to negative 36 and adding to 0. So it means my factors are going to be 6 and negative 6. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put an x with each of those 6 so that I can write them as if they were existing in the middle in the first place. So now I'm ready to factor by grouping. So I'm going to go ahead and make my two groups. Between x squared and 6x, I can take out an x. So then I'm dividing each of those terms by x, and I get x plus 6. Now, out of the second group, between negative 6 and negative 36, I'm going to take out a negative 6. And once I do that, I'm left with x plus 6, and that's going to be equal to 0. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to factor out the x plus 6. And once I take that out, I'm going to write what's left after that, which is x minus 6. And that's going to be equal to 0. So since these two factors are set equal to 0, to solve for x, I can take each factor and set them equal to 0. Here, subtract 6 from both sides, and I get x is equal to negative 6. Here, add 6 to both sides, and I get that x is equal to 6. So then my two answers for this one are x is equal to negative 6 and x is equal to 6. Now, let's go ahead and let's take a look at number 4. So for number 4, again, we're going to have to use the quadratic formula on this one. So my A is going to be equal to 5, my B is 6, and my C is negative 7. So X is going to be equal to opposite of B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4 times A times C, all of that over 2 times A. So first thing I'm going to do is simplify underneath the radical. Okay, so we're going to do 6 squared minus 4 times 5 times negative 7. Okay, so once you do that in your calculator, you end up getting 176. Okay, you should be trying this in your calculator along with me to make sure you can do it right. And 2 times 10, or 2 times 5 is 10. So now we're going to take it and split it up. So we're going to do negative 6 plus the square root of 176. You're going to type that in your calculator and hit enter, and then you're going to divide it by 10. And once you do that, you're going to get 0.73. So then we're going to take negative 7 minus the square root of 176, hit enter, and then you're going to divide that by 10. And when you do that, you get negative 1.93. And that's your final answer. So you have negative 1.93 and 0.73 for the quadratic formula. Okay, again, you should be checking your rounding. For example, this one was 0.726. Because this third number was 5 or greater, we round it up. So make sure you're keeping track of that for me. So let's take a look at number 5. So for number 5, I can actually use the zero product property, which means factoring. Again, you can always choose to use the quadratic formula if you would like. So we're multiplying to 64 and adding to 16. So to do that, we're going to use 8 and 8. So now we're going to use that to split up 16x. So x squared plus 8x plus 8x. So again, I just put an x with each of those and use it to split up my 16x. Plus 64 is equal to 0. So then what we're going to do is we're going to create two groups. Between x squared and 8x, we can take out an x. So then I'm going to take out an x and I'm left with x plus 8. Between 8 and 64, I can take out an 8. So we're dividing each of those by 8. And we get this. So then we're going to take out what's left over, which is x plus 8. And once we take that out, we're going to take what's left on the outside, which is also x plus 8. So x plus 8 and x plus 8, since they are matching, we really only have to set one of the factors equal to 0 because the other one is going to be the exact same. So we're going to go ahead and solve this for x, and we end up getting that x is equal to a negative 8. So that is our final answer for number 5. Now, let's take a look at number 6. So for number 6, we're going to use the quadratic formula. So I get a is equal to 2, b is equal to 3, c is equal to negative 5. Now this is one you could use a zero product property if you wanted to, but I wanted to do one more practice with the quadratic formula. So then we get that x is equal to opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all of that over 2 times a. So then we get negative 3 plus or minus the square root. So we're going to do 3 squared minus 4 times 2 times 5. When you type that into your calculator, you end up getting 49 divided by 2. So then we get negative 3 plus the square root of 49. So on that, I'm going to hit enter. And then I'm going to take that answer and I'm going to divide it by 4. And when I do that, I get 1. Then I'm going to do negative 3 minus the square root of 49, and then I'm going to hit enter and divide it by 4. And when I do that, I get negative 2.5. So I have negative 2.5 and 1 as my final answers on number 6. So taking a look at number 7, it says the path the dirt biker follows during a jump is given by y is equal to negative 0.3x squared plus 6x plus 5, where x is the horizontal distance in feet from the edge of the ramp and y is the height in feet. What is the maximum height of the rider? So we want to figure out how high the rider gets, and that's going to be a vertex problem because we're looking for the maximum. Remember, that's how you know it's vertex. So in order to get the y coordinate of the vertex for the height, we need to get the x coordinate first. So remember, to get the x coordinate of the vertex, we use that formula x is equal to opposite of b over 2a. So I'm going to do opposite of b over 2 times a. So I always like to multiply out the bottom first. So when you do 2 times a negative 0.3, you end up getting a negative 0.6. So you're going to do negative 6 divided by negative 0.6, which is going to give you a positive 10. So when the skateboarder reaches his maximum height, he's gone a horizontal distance of 10 feet. So now we're going to go ahead and plug this in. So wherever I see an X, I'm plugging in a 10. And you can go ahead and type this into your calculator. Negative 0.3 squared times 10 squared plus 6 times 10 plus 5. And when you do that, you get 35. So that's our maximum height, and it tells us that the maximum height is in feet. So I'm going to label this feet. So the maximum height then was 35 feet. Now, let's take a look at number 8. It says the Power Tower at Valley Fair takes riders at the top of a tower and drops them 45 feet at speeds reaching 14 meters per second. So here's the 45 feet, here's the 14 meters per second. It's already in the formula for you. A function that models the ride is h is equal to negative 5t squared plus 14t plus 45, where h is the height in feet and t is the time in seconds. After how many seconds does it take for the riders to drop to the ground? So let's go ahead and let's take a look at this. So what we want to do is we want to use the quadratic formula because we're trying to figure out when it comes back to the ground. And since we're using the quadratic formula, we want to think about how high I am when I'm off the ground. While I'm on the ground, I'm 0 feet above the ground. So I'm going to be setting this equal to 0. And now I'm going to use the quadratic formula. So my A is negative 5, my B is 14, or 114, geez. And my C is 45. So I'm going to go ahead and plug that into the quadratic formula. So I get opposite of B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4 times A times C, all of that over 2 times A. So the first thing I want to do is simplify what's underneath the radical. So in my calculator, I'm going to do 14 squared minus 4 times negative 5 times 45. And when I do that, I get the square root of 1,096. And then I'm going to divide that by negative 10. So now I want to split it up and do my two versions. So I'm going to do negative 14 plus the square root of 1,096. And then I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to divide that by negative 10. And when I do that, I get negative 1.910. Since my third number is below 5, I can just go ahead and leave it as is, and I don't have to worry about rounding up. Now I'm going to do my minus version, but before I do that, I'm going to throw that answer out because we're talking about time. Remember that negative time doesn't make sense. So now I'm going to subtract this off. So I'm going to do negative 14 minus the square root of 1,096, hit enter, and then divide it by negative 10. And when I do that, I end up getting 4.710. Again, this is below 5, so I can leave this as 4.71. And I'm going to go ahead and label this as seconds. So that's how many seconds it's going to take to reach the ground. So that concludes your quiz review. So when you're ready to take your quiz, let me know. Thanks for listening.